Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penobscot Bay. It's a windy, breezy one, that's for sure. I'm out looking at capturing some lighthouse images today. It's a rainy one, kind of right now, but started off this morning in Bar Harbor. We're seeing a total of 12 lighthouses today, and I'm hoping to capture some good images. It's been a little bit of a challenge shooting in these conditions today, but the clouds have been pretty spectacular at times, and I'm having a blast. It looks kind of cold the way I'm dressed right now, and it is, but the rain is actually worse than the cold right now. But having a good time and hopefully grabbing some good images. So I'm going to show you where I've been already. We're about halfway through the trip right now. So I'm going to show you where I've been, and then we'll continue with where we're going, and hopefully the images I've captured up to this point are good, and the ones coming up are just going to be just as good too. So let's go back and see what I've been to already, and then we'll continue on. So let's go. Well, it actually started off as quite a nice morning when we left Bar Harbor, with beautiful sunshine and calm seas, but the clouds were quickly building to the west. Our first lighthouse of the day was Egg Rock, just over a mile off the shores of Acadia National Park. Unfortunately, a small cluster of clouds began to obscure the sun as we approached the lighthouse, and the otherwise beautiful vista took on a rather dull appearance. The mountains of Mount Desert Island were starting to pop with the peak of fall color, and I wanted to try and create an image of the lighthouse with Champlain Mountain directly behind it. Unfortunately, the clouds didn't cooperate as they meandered over the area of the sky where the sun ought to be. I settled for capturing a few images of this angle of the lighthouse without the sun, as we soon got back underway and began to head out to the next lighthouse. However, as we pulled away from the lighthouse, the sun suddenly appeared from amidst the clouds and wonderfully bathed the lighthouse in some beautiful light. I had to quickly compose an image as we moved further and further away from the lighthouse, and I fired off a few exposures before we had moved just too far away. Here's what I captured. It was such a rush trying to capture this image, but I really like how it came together. The morning sun combined with the incoming clouds created some dynamic contrast for this scene, and the layers of light and shadows on the hills behind the lighthouse were a nice addition to the scene, which I didn't even notice when I was shooting it. So with this image captured, we continued our way towards the next lighthouse. Winter Harbor Lighthouse, located on a small island off the Schoodic Peninsula named Mark Island, was our next stop. I always find this one an interesting beacon to photograph, yet I usually struggle to capture an image that I'm satisfied with. As we drifted off the east side of the island, I contemplated a few compositions, yet nothing was really catching my eye. That is, until I spotted the peak of Cadillac Mountain poking out over Turtle Island to the left of the lighthouse. An idea quickly popped into mind, and I waited for the vessel to move just a bit further towards the north before firing off a few exposures. This is the image that I was after. I really loved how Cadillac Mountain could be framed at the lighthouse in this way. Being able to include such a defining feature of the landscape like this always makes these kind of images some of my favorites to capture, and the light was absolutely perfect for this shot. Just like my previous image, the light had such a dynamic feel to it, and it was really nice that the clouds had some nice textures to them too. We departed from the Winter Harbor Lighthouse and made our way down the coast toward our next stop. There were many lobstermen on the waters of Frenchman Bay on this morning, and I captured this image of one of them tending to their trap. Lobstermen and their vessels are such an iconic and important part of the Maine coast, and I always enjoy capturing images of them. For all the colorful trees in this area, this island wasn't one of the most vibrant, but I still like how this image came out. The clouds were really taking hold now, but there were still bits of sun as we pulled away from Mount Desert Island and the big mountains. I loved how the light was playing across the colorful hills, with pockets of beautiful warm light contrasted by the cold dark shadows, so I tried to capture an image that showcased this. We soon arrived at our next lighthouse, the Baker Island Light, but over the years the trees on the island have grown up to the point that you can barely see the lighthouse from the water now. It took a few minutes, but we finally spotted the lantern peeking out from between a few treetops, so I figured I'd document the view. Continuing down the coast, I was really enjoying how the light on the horizon was beautifully contrasted by the dark clouds overhead, and framed up a few different compositions to capture the scene. We passed by more lobster boats, and I tried to capture some images of them with the dynamic light, but I ended up liking this wide-angle shot of the empty sea. We soon approached the Great Duck Lighthouse, and the sun was shining beautifully on the white tower. I captured a few shots of the lighthouse as we rounded the eastern edge of the island, but the sun suddenly went behind a cloud and the stunning view became quite flat. I framed up a few more images, but the sun never did return, so after a little while of floating off the island, we turned to the southwest and headed for our next lighthouse. I love the lighting in this scene, and that subtle reflection of the white tower adds a nice touch to the foreground. It was a very fleeting couple of minutes with the light, and though this isn't the best angle of the lighthouse, I was happy to capture this image before the sun vanished behind the clouds for the rest of the day. We made our way past the island of Frenchboro and into Burntcoat Harbor on Swan's Island. At the entrance to the harbor on Hockomock Head is the Burntcoat Harbor Lighthouse, where we spent a few minutes floating off to the south. There were some interesting lines in the clouds over the lighthouse from this vantage point, but they were partially obscured by the tree line, so I waited for the boat to begin to pull away from the shore before firing off this shot. The clouds are what helped to make this a salvageable image. The light was incredibly flat, but the interesting textures of the lighthouse add some intrigue to the scene. Thankfully, the clouds would only get more interesting as we made our way down the coast towards Penobscot Bay. Our next lighthouse was the Isle Ho Light on the eastern side of Penobscot Bay. I've always thought this to be one of the most beautiful island light stations in Maine, and even on a day like today, it's always a treat to visit. Shooting this lighthouse in the morning and early afternoon is usually really tough as all the water views face in a southerly direction and right into the sun. So the clouds today actually allowed for a better opportunity to capture some images. As we floated around the lighthouse, I captured a few angles of the light, trying to capture a nice view of the station with some of the better clouds overhead. None of the really interesting formations were over the lighthouse, but I did capture this image. Though not my favorite image, I do like how this turned out. As I said, I really enjoy photographing this lighthouse, and I think the image holds a certain mood to it. The light is nicely balanced and much better than the harsh backlight that would have been present under blue skies. So with this image captured, we turned south and headed towards perhaps the most highly anticipated lighthouse of the trip. Saddleback Ledge Lighthouse. One of the most unusual and rugged beacons here on the Maine coast, and a lighthouse that, for me, is the highlight of any tour that cruises past it. Located on a small and isolated ledge that takes on the full brunt of major coastal storms, this stout little tower is a marvel to observe. On a gray day like today, it can be hard to get the granite tower to stand out in imagery, but I thought perhaps I could take advantage of the situation by creating a more dramatic image that could help highlight the desolate and remote nature of the ledge and the lighthouse that sits on it. We circumnavigated the ledge, and I captured a few different angles of the lighthouse with some awesome cloud formations over top, but I just couldn't get the sort of shot I had in mind. As we slowly cruised past the western edge of the rock, I noticed how soft the light was and liked the compact look of the ledge, so I took a few shots and this is what I captured. For such a raw and dreary afternoon, I really couldn't have asked for this image to have come out any better. I love how the emptiness of the scene emphasizes the lighthouse and the rocky ledge, Yet there are those rolling textures in the clouds and the ripples in the water, and both of those add some nice touches of interest. Add in that soft diffused light and it was absolutely perfect for this shot. We soon continued our journey, passing by Vinyl Haven and then around the corner to Heron Neck Lighthouse on Green's Island. The lighthouse was boarded up for the summer, and it had begun to rain a bit as we floated off the southern side of the island. I searched hard for a composition, but between having to constantly wipe rain off my lens and the lack of interest in clouds here, I wasn't able to find a composition I truly liked. We stayed off the lighthouse for a few minutes, then turned around and headed back north towards our next lighthouse. As I said, I was having trouble finding any compositions that I liked with the prevailing conditions, so I decided to capture this image and show the different areas of light and dark clouds over top the beacon. We made the transit back across Penobscot Bay, where the rain really started to come down. We eventually made it to Mark Island Lighthouse at the entrance to the Deer Isle thoroughfare, where the grain began to let up a bit. Mark Island is always a struggle to shoot for me, as I find that the lantern easily gets lost amidst the trees behind it. We slowly navigated around the northwest side of the island, where the lighthouse emerged from the trees. I thought the clouds looked rather interesting from this angle, so I captured a few shots as we began to head away from the island.
After leaving Deer Isle Lighthouse, we had to cut through the Deer Isle thoroughfare to get across back towards Acadia and the surrounding region, where we're headed to see our last couple lighthouses. So we had to pass by Stonington, which is obviously, for my money, one of the prettiest harbors here on the Maine coast. And even on a gloomy day like this, it was such a treat to see it from the water. You see all the homes going up the hill with all the fishing vessels in front. It's just really, really cool. So that was nice to see. Hopefully I got a good picture of it. If I did, you guys will see it on the screen right here. So yeah, on to Blue Hill Bay Lighthouse next, and then Bass Harbor Head and Bear Island Lighthouse before heading back to the dock. So we're gonna head that way now.
So entering into Stonington, I spotted this lobster boat moored close to the shore, and that nice yellow tree was lined up right behind it. I like how this came out. It easily conveys that sense of autumn with those colorful leaves, and I thought this worked really well with that square crop. I really like this image. Stonington is one of the busiest lobster ports on the Maine coast, and in this image you can obviously see the many boats spread across this section of the harbor. And that lobster wharf, just off to the left-hand side of the image, adds a nice touch, I think, along obviously with the fall foliage in the background. We left Stonington and continued towards Blue Hill Bay Lighthouse. It was still raining lightly, but it was in much more tolerable levels than it had been to the south. The lighthouse soon came into view, and it didn't take me long to spot my composition. I framed up an image of the light station with those long streaked clouds behind it with my telephoto lens and quickly fired off a few exposures. We motored close to the island, and I captured a few more angles of the lighthouse as we drifted off to the eastern side. I got a few decent images, but my first image on the approach was easily my favorite. I love the clouds in this image, which was what originally drew me to this composition. It is a nice angle of the lighthouse, and I decided to balance out the frame by including the outbuildings and the steel pole that the light is on to the right. I also like the orangish hues of the rockweed along the edge of the island, as it helps to add a bit of color to the image. We were approaching Mount Desert Island now, and soon our next lighthouse, Bass Harbor Head, was coming into view. This is one of Maine's most well-known lighthouses, as it sits inside Acadia National Park, but it's perhaps even prettier to see from the water. I knew I wanted to capture a shot of the lighthouse with a very nice red and white bell buoy that sits just to the east of the site. As I waited for the boat to motor past the buoy, I shot a few images of the lighthouse, but nothing that I really liked. We soon exhausted our time, and we began to pull away from the lighthouse and headed towards the buoy. When we got close to the buoy, I quickly fired off a few exposures, and, well, here's what I captured. I'd shot this scene once before with some spectacular golden light. The conditions were not near as dramatic here, but I just loved this scene. The clouds have a bit of depth to them, and the bright red of the buoy really pops here in this scene. And the lighthouse, though surrounded by trees, is still easily visible, and you can see the rocks below the lighthouse, how they really have some height to them, especially at a lower tide like this. But while I was waiting for the boat to make it out to the buoy, I did also capture these two images. That streak of light underneath those dark clouds was so awesome. I was marveling at how dynamic the light was when I heard the motor of this lobster boat about a quarter mile away. I thought it would make a perfect addition to the scene, so I composed the image and waited for the vessel to cut across the scene. When it did, I captured about 3 shots before it was already out of frame. Needless to say, I'm thrilled with how this image came out. I always like shots like this, capturing the shapes, patterns, and contrast of the rippling water. After capturing the previous image, I continued to look around for another composition because the light was so awesome. When I saw the wake from the lobster boat quickly rolling towards the shore, I began shooting at the patterns I thought looked the most interesting, and well, this was the image I thought came out the best. With the awesome landscape of Acadia in full view, we quickly made our way to the last lighthouse of the trip, Bear Island Light. Though still about an hour from sunset, the light was getting low as we approached the island from the south. There wasn't any colorful foliage to speak of on the island, and really there was no composition that I liked, as we slowly drifted around the front of the lighthouse. After a few different ideas, and capturing a couple of images, I decided that there wasn't a good image to be had, and stowed my gear as we quickly pulled away from the lighthouse. It wasn't until I got back and looked at my images did I discover one of my favorite images from the whole trip. I was thrilled to discover this shot on my memory card. The mood of the scene, the darkness combined with the illuminated light of the lighthouse, really draws me to this. And the large rolling peak of Penobscot Mountain looming behind the lighthouse really adds an awesome touch, and frankly helped to complete the image.
So we saw our last lighthouse a few minutes ago. We are now heading back into Bar Harbor. It's getting darker now. It's getting closer to sunset now. So yeah, we had a great trip. I mean, to be able to see 12 lighthouses, especially some cool ones like Saddleback Ledge and Egg Rock and Great Duck, great stuff. Yeah, what a trip. Well, I'm gonna leave the video here, guys. It's been a fun one. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a comment. We much appreciate it. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Plan on having some more really cool photographic adventures, so be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's it. So, signing off from Acadia National Park and Bar Harbor. See you guys next time.